The glass conference room went quiet when he leaned in. Not raised voice. Not anger. Just calm, surgical menace. "If you repeat anything you've seen," my director said softly, eyes fixed on the spreadsheet in front of him, "I will personally make sure you never work in this industry again." My stomach dropped. Around us, executives pretended to scroll on laptops. Someone coughed. No one looked up. My fingers tightened around my notebook until the spiral dug into my palm. He straightened his jacket and added almost kindly, "Think carefully. Careers are fragile." The meeting continued like nothing had happened. I sat there burning. The fluorescent lights felt too bright suddenly, and the air conditioning too cold. I wanted to stand up and walk out, but my legs wouldn't move. So I stayed. He nodded. I wrote down notes about quarterly projections like a good employee should. Inside, something fundamental shifted. I didn't react. That's what shocked me most. No shaking voice. No tears. Just a slow inhale through my nose while my heart slammed against my ribs. I nodded once, as if he'd said something ordinary. Professional. My pen kept moving across the page, recording budget numbers I'd forget the moment I left that room. Inside, something cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like ice splitting under pressure, the sound sharp and final. Because threats like that don't come from confidence. They come from fear. And I'd seen enough workplace power plays to know the difference. Confident people don't corner subordinates in meetings. They don't need to. He was afraid of something. And whatever it was, he thought I knew about it. The meeting ended at 3:47 p.m. I checked my watch twice to be sure. I gathered my notebook, stood up, and walked to my desk without speaking to anyone. My hands were steady. My expression was blank. But my mind was racing. I remember thinking, what the hell did I just get pulled into? He hadn't accused me of anything. Hadn't corrected my work. Hadn't even looked at me directly after that initial threat. He just warned me. And somehow, that felt worse than any formal reprimand would have. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, staring at the screen without seeing it. My inbox showed 43 unread messages. I didn't touch a single one. Around me, the office hummed with normal afternoon energy. Phones rang. Printers whirred. Someone laughed at something on their screen. The world kept turning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Because I knew what I'd seen in those reports. I knew what didn't add up. And now I knew that someone else knew I knew. The question was, what was I going to do about it? My name is Natalie Harris. I'm 32 years old, and before that meeting, I believed if you kept your head down and did your job well, you'd be safe. I was wrong. I'd spent 8 years at Consolidated Financial Services, working my way from junior analyst to senior compliance officer. Not flashy. Not political. Just consistent. I handled compliance reviews. Boring work no one wanted but everyone depended on. I knew where the numbers were buried because I was the one who checked them. Every quarter, every audit, every vendor contract. I was the person who made sure everything aligned with policy. That was my job. That was my purpose. Which meant I noticed things. Patterns. Decisions that skipped process. Numbers that changed between draft and final versions. Approvals that appeared without supporting documentation. And apparently I wasn't supposed to notice. My director was Vincent Crawford. 48. Smooth. Always dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He'd been with the company 12 years and had climbed steadily through strategic positioning and calculated charm. Everyone liked Vincent. He remembered birthdays. He asked about your weekend. He was the guy who organized happy hours and mentored junior staff. Until you saw what I saw. 6 months earlier, I'd flagged a discrepancy in a vendor report. Nothing explosive. Just unusual. A contract renewal had been processed without the standard approval chain. The vendor, Summit Solutions LLC, had received payment authorization faster than policy allowed. When I cross-referenced the timeline, 3 required signatures were missing from the documentation. I brought it to Vincent's attention in a routine check-in meeting. Visual. Professional. Vincent, I noticed the Summit Solutions renewal went through without full approval documentation. Should I flag it for the next audit review? His response came in under a minute. Not your lane, Natalie. He smiled when he said it. That easy, charming smile that made you feel like you were overcomplicating things. That account was fast-tracked at the executive level, he continued, closing his laptop. Special circumstances. All above board, just expedited. No need to flag it. That smile was the first warning. Because his eyes didn't match it. I didn't push. I nodded, made a note in my file and moved on. That's what you do when you want to keep your job and not make waves. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Special circumstances. Executive approval. Those phrases were vague enough to mean nothing and everything at the same time. So I did what any good compliance officer would do. I looked deeper. The Summit Solutions contract wasn't enormous, about $280,000 annually for consulting services. But when I pulled up their payment history, something stood out. They'd been receiving payments for 3 years, but I couldn't find any deliverables. No reports, no presentations, no documentation of services rendered. Just invoices and approvals. Always with Vincent's signature somewhere in the chain. I made copies of everything. Quietly. I saved them to my personal drive, telling myself I was just being thorough, just doing my job. But deep down I knew I was building a case. After that meeting about Summit Solutions, things shifted. Subtly at first. Then obviously. Meetings stopped including me. Project updates I used to receive automatically disappeared from my inbox. Files I'd always reviewed suddenly didn't need my sign-off. When I asked Vincent about it, he smiled again. We're restructuring workflows. Making things more efficient. Don't worry, you're still essential to what we do. But essential people don't get cut out of communications. Essential people don't find their access permissions quietly downgraded. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself this was normal corporate evolution. That roles shift and priorities change. I wasn't imagining it. And the more I got pushed to the margins, the more I realized something important. They were trying to isolate me before I could connect the dots. The problem was I'd already connected them. I wasn't the loudest person in the room. Never had been. I didn't challenge people in meetings or send aggressive emails. I asked questions quietly. I raised concerns privately. I believed in working within the system, which made me the perfect target. People like Vincent don't threaten people who shout. They threaten the ones who listen, the ones who notice, the ones who keep records and remember details. Because loud people are dismissed as troublemakers. Quiet people are seen as trustworthy, until they become inconvenient. Vincent knew I wouldn't make a scene. He knew I'd absorb the threat, process it internally, and probably stay quiet out of fear or professionalism or both. He was counting on my silence. What he didn't know was that threats have a way of clarifying things. They strip away all the politeness and corporate niceties and force you to decide. Who am I, really? Am I someone who stays quiet when something's wrong? Or am I someone who speaks up, even when it costs me? I spent 3 weeks wrestling with that question. 2 weeks before the conference room threat, Vincent stopped by my desk. It was late afternoon, and most people had already left for the day. Natalie, got a second? His voice was casual, friendly. I looked up from my screen. Sure. He leaned against my cubicle wall, arms crossed. You're doing great work. Really. The audit team specifically mentioned your attention to detail. Waited. Compliments from Vincent always had a second part. I just want to make sure you're not overthinking things, he continued, his tone shifting slightly. Compliance can be a rabbit hole, you know? Sometimes the details don't matter as much as the big picture. His hand rested on the back of my chair. Too familiar. Too deliberate. I felt it then. Fear. Not mine's. He was testing me. Seeing how I'd respond. Trying to gauge whether I'd picked up on what he was doing. Gave him nothing. I appreciate that. I'll keep it in mind. He smiled, patted my chair and walked away. That night I made my decision. I started reviewing old reports with fresh eyes. Not just Summit Solutions but every vendor contract Vincent had touched in the past 3 years. The patterns emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. Policies bent. Approvals bypassed. Audits delayed. Always with his signature somewhere nearby. 4 vendors stood out. Summit Solutions, Pinnacle Advisory, Keystone Consulting, and Brightwell Services. Combined, they'd received over $1.8 million in payments over 3 years. None of them had significant deliverables on file. All of them had been fast-tracked through approval processes that should have taken weeks but somehow cleared in days. I cross-referenced the vendor registration information. 3 of the 4 companies had been incorporated within a month of each other. All 4 listed the same registered agent. And when I dug into public records, I found something that made my blood run cold. Vincent's brother-in-law was listed as a director for Pinnacle Advisory. This wasn't sloppy accounting. This was fraud. Deliberate, systematic fraud. And I had documented proof. The morning of the conference room meeting, I'd printed a summary report. Just the key findings. Vendor names, payment amounts, missing documentation, the connection to Vincent's brother-in-law. I didn't plan to show anyone. I just wanted it in front of me. Physical proof that I wasn't crazy, that the patterns I'd been seeing were real. I must have looked at it during the meeting. Maybe for just a second. Maybe I let my guard down. Because that's when Vincent leaned in and delivered his threat. Quietly. Precisely. Like a surgeon making an incision. When the meeting ended, he walked out without looking at me. Didn't collect his materials. Didn't shake hands with anyone. Just left. I stayed seated, pulse roaring in my ears. The summary report was still tucked inside my notebook. No one else had seen it. But Vincent knew. That was when I understood. Silence wouldn't protect me anymore. It would only delay the inevitable. He'd already decided I was a threat. The question was whether I'd act like one. I didn't confront him. That would have been stupid and pointless. He'd deny everything, spin some story about misunderstandings and misinterpretations, and I'd end up looking paranoid or vindictive. Instead, I documented everything. Versions of files. Every interaction, neutral, factual, unemotional. I created a timeline of events, matching them against company policies and approval requirements. I saved everything to an encrypted cloud drive that had nothing to do with the company network. I printed hard copies and stored them at home. I made sure every piece of evidence was dated and organized. If Vincent wanted quiet, I'd give him quiet. But I'd also give him accountability. The hardest part was acting normal. Showing up to work. Responding to emails. Attending meetings where he smiled at me like we were colleagues instead of adversaries. I became very good at wearing a mask. Professional. Unbothered. Inside, I was building a case that would destroy him. About a week after the threat, a colleague named Brenda pulled me aside in the break room. "Hey, I heard you're struggling," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. I poured my coffee slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "Am I?" Her eyes flicked away. "I mean, that's what Vincent mentioned. He said you've been under a lot of stress. Missing deadlines. Making errors." None of that was true. I'd never missed a deadline in 8 years. My error rate was virtually 0. But I understood immediately what was happening. He was planting seeds. Preparing the ground for my dismissal by creating a narrative. Natalie's burned out. Natalie's making mistakes. Natalie's not reliable anymore. I smiled at Brenda. "I'm fine. But thanks for checking in." She nodded, uncomfortable, and hurried away. That's when I knew the smear campaign had started. Vincent wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was actively working to discredit me, to make sure that if I ever spoke up, no one would believe me. He was thorough. I had to give him that. 2 days later, my desk phone rang. Internal extension. I didn't recognize the number. "Hello, Natalie. It's Kyle from accounting." His voice was quiet, tense. I'd worked with Kyle on a few projects. Good guy. Detail-oriented. Kept to himself. Hey, what's up? I can't talk long, he said quickly. But I wanted to warn you. Vincent's been asking people questions about you. Your work habits. Whether you seem reliable. Whether you've said anything unusual. My grip tightened on the phone. Why? I don't know. But he's being really careful about it. Casual conversations. Planting doubts. Be careful, okay? He's watching who talks to you. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. Then I hung up, pulled out my notebook, and wrote down the date, time, and content of Kyle's call. Let Vincent watch. Let him spin his stories and spread his rumors. Every action he took was more evidence. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. My laptop was open on the kitchen table. The evidence folder displayed on screen. 27 documents. 16 emails. 4 vendor contracts. 1 organization chart showing the connection to Vincent's brother-in-law. Everything lined up. The fraud was clear. The cover-up was obvious. Could walk away. Pack up my desk tomorrow. Find another job. Start over somewhere else. Disappear quietly like others probably had before me. Or I could tell the truth. File a formal whistleblower report. Expose what Vincent had been doing. Risk everything I'd built for 8 years on the chance that someone would actually listen and act. The smart play was to walk away. Keep my reputation intact. Avoid the fight. But I'd never been good at walking away from things that mattered. I pulled up the company's ethics hotline website. Read through the whistleblower protection policy. Reviewed the submission guidelines. Then I started writing my report. Facts only. No emotions. No accusations. Just documented evidence of policy violations and potential fraud. I worked until 2:17 a.m. When I finally hit submit, I didn't feel brave. Felt calm. Clear. Whatever happened next, I'd told the truth. Nothing happened. Not immediately. The ethics hotline sent an automated confirmation. Your report has been received and will be reviewed according to company policy. I went to work the next day. And the next. And the next. Everything continued exactly as before. Vincent strutted through the office like a man untouched. Smiling. Confident. He stopped by my desk once, asking if I'd finished a quarterly summary. His tone was pleasant. Professional. Like he'd never threatened me. Like nothing was wrong. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. I started wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. If the report had been ignored. If Vincent had connections high enough to bury it before anyone important even saw it. Maybe I'd just destroyed my career for nothing. Maybe he'd win after all, and I'd be the one forced out quietly. My reputation shredded by his careful rumors. For a moment, just a brief, dark moment, I wondered if I'd misjudged everything. Then the audit notice dropped. It came via email on a Tuesday morning, sent to Vincent and copied to executive leadership. Notice of financial compliance audit, vendor management review. I saw it because audit notices went to everyone in the compliance department. Standard procedure. But this wasn't standard. Special audits didn't get announced without cause. And the timing, 3 weeks after my whistleblower report, couldn't be coincidental. Vincent's office door stayed closed all morning. Usually he kept it open, projecting accessibility and approachability. Not today. At 11:30 a.m. He emerged and tried to pull me into an empty conference room. Natalie, we should clear the air, he said, voice tight but controlled. There seems to be some confusion about vendor processes, and I want to make sure we're aligned before the auditors arrive. I declined. Politely. Publicly. Right there in the hallway where 3 other employees could hear. I think it's best if we keep all audit-related conversations documented in email, I said, my voice steady. That way there's no confusion. His jaw tightened. For just a second, maybe 2, fear flickered across his face. Real visible fear. Then he recovered, forced a smile and walked away. That was the first crack. The auditors arrived the following Monday. 2 of them. Stern-faced professionals from the corporate office who didn't smile and didn't make small talk. They set up in a conference room and started requesting documents. Old ones. Specific ones. Files that should have been archived but somehow still existed in digital storage. Vincent tried to control the narrative. He volunteered information before they asked for it. He explained away irregularities with confident corporate speak about streamlined processes and executive discretion. But auditors are trained to spot patterns. And I'd given them a roadmap. By Wednesday they'd expanded the scope. Not just Summit Solutions. All 4 suspicious vendors. Not just the past year. 3 full years of transactions. Vincent stopped making eye contact with people. He walked through the office with his phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. His door stayed closed more often than it opened. People noticed. The whole office noticed. And in that particular way that corporate environments work, everyone suddenly remembered the rumors they'd heard, the small irregularities they dismissed, the questions they'd been too polite to ask. The walls were closing in. By the second week of the audit, other names started appearing in the document requests. Vincent's assistant, the VP of Operations, a senior contract manager who'd signed off on several questionable approvals. This wasn't just about Vincent anymore. The investigation had widened into something bigger, exposing a network of shortcuts and policy violations that went beyond one corrupt director. I watched it unfold from my desk, maintaining my normal routine. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just kept doing my job, answering auditor questions when asked, providing documentation when requested. Professional, factual, unemotional. Meanwhile, Vincent unraveled. His usual polish disappeared. He snapped at people in meetings. He sent rambling emails that tried to justify decisions made years ago. He blamed process gaps and communication failures and everyone except himself. It was painful to watch, in a way. Seeing someone who'd built such a careful facade lose control piece by piece. But I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choices. He'd threatened my career to protect his fraud. Now he was facing the consequences. 3 weeks into the audit, Vincent's office door stayed closed all day. His assistant packed boxes into her car during lunch. By afternoon, both of them were gone. No announcement. No explanation. Just absence where presence used to be. The office buzzed with speculation. Was he fired? Suspended? Did he quit? No one knew for certain, but everyone had theories. Kept quiet. I knew what happened to whistleblowers who celebrated too loudly. They became targets themselves, labeled as troublemakers or disloyal employees, punished for disrupting the system even when they'd exposed corruption. So I said nothing. I worked. Waited. 2 days later, HR called me in. The HR director's name was Patricia Ford. Mid-50s. Professional. She'd been with the company almost 20 years and had a reputation for fairness. She gestured for me to sit, then closed the door behind me. Natalie, thank you for coming in. I wanted to update you personally on the audit findings. I nodded, hands folded in my lap, expression neutral. The investigation substantiated serious policy violations, she continued carefully. Multiple instances of approval fraud, vendor kickback schemes, and deliberate documentation manipulation. The scope extended beyond initial reports and involved several employees at different levels. She paused, watching my reaction. I gave her nothing, just attention. Vincent Crawford's employment was terminated effective immediately. His assistant resigned. 2 other employees have been placed on administrative leave pending further review. I understand, I said quietly. Patricia leaned forward slightly. I also want to acknowledge your role in bringing these issues to light. Your whistleblower report was detailed, factual, and provided the foundation for a comprehensive investigation. You did exactly what our ethics policy encourages employees to do. Something tight in my chest finally loosened. Validation. Not from Vincent. Not from the colleagues who'd repeated his rumors. But from someone who mattered. Thank you, I said. I just did what I thought was right. You did, Patricia agreed. And the company is better for it. The following week, I received an email from the Vice President of Finance. Natalie, I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you. Do you have time to meet this afternoon? I did. The VP's office was on the executive floor, a place I'd visited maybe twice in 8 years. She greeted me warmly, offered coffee, and gestured to a chair across from her desk. I've been reviewing your work history, she said. 8 years of exemplary performance. 0 compliance violations. Multiple commendations for thoroughness and attention to detail. And most recently, the integrity to report serious misconduct despite personal risk. I listened, uncertain where this was going. We're restructuring the compliance department, she continued. Creating a new role, Director of Financial Compliance. Independent reporting line directly to executive leadership. Enhanced authority to review and approve vendor contracts and financial processes. She slid a folder across the desk. I'd like to offer you that position. I opened the folder. Title was there. The salary, a 35% increase from my current pay. The job description outlining real authority and decision-making power. I want to be clear, she added. This isn't a gesture. It's recognition of your capabilities and a strategic decision to strengthen our compliance function. But I'll understand if you need time to consider it. I looked up. I accept. But I have conditions. She smiled slightly. I expected you would. My conditions were simple. The new role required direct access to all financial records without approval delays. It required mandatory compliance training for executives and managers. It required protection against retaliation, documented in writing, with clear escalation paths if issues arose. And it required an external audit firm to review our vendor management systems and recommend improvements. The VP agreed to everything. I started the new role 2 weeks later. My first action was implementing a vendor registration system that required verification of ownership structures and deliverable tracking. My second was creating an anonymous reporting channel for compliance concerns that bypassed normal management chains. The third was ensuring that every employee understood that shortcuts and policy violations would be investigated regardless of who was involved. People noticed the changes. Some resisted initially. Change always faces resistance. But when the first questionable approval got flagged and reviewed, and when that review led to a legitimate vendor correction rather than punishment, attitudes shifted. Compliance wasn't about catching people anymore. It was about preventing problems before they started. 6 months after Vincent's termination, I received a LinkedIn message from a former colleague who'd left the company years ago. I heard about what happened with Vincent. I wish I'd been brave enough to speak up when I worked there. He pulled similar things back then, but I convinced myself it wasn't my place to say anything. Good for you for doing what I couldn't. I stared at that message for a long time. Because it revealed something I'd suspected but never confirmed. I wasn't his first target. I probably wasn't even his second or third. How many people had he threatened? How many had stayed quiet? How many had left rather than fight? Been lucky. Lucky that I documented everything. Lucky that the company took my report seriously. Lucky that the audit uncovered enough evidence to force action. But luck wasn't the whole story. I made choices too. Chose to notice. I chose to document. Chose to report. I chose truth over comfort. And that choice mattered more than luck ever could. I learned something through all of this, something I carry with me now and probably will for the rest of my career. Silence doesn't keep you safe. Just postpones the inevitable. Vincent tried to end my career to protect himself. He threatened me because he thought I'd stay quiet, that fear would keep me in line like it had kept others before me. He was wrong. Not because I was particularly brave or righteous. I didn't file that report feeling like a hero. I filed it feeling tired and angry and determined that someone should know the truth. The threat he made in that conference room was meant to break me. Instead, it clarified everything. He destroyed himself trying to stay untouchable. The fraud, the threats, the cover-ups, all of it eventually collapsed under its own weight. I just helped speed up the process. And that was enough. Now when I walk through the office, I don't look over my shoulder. I don't wonder who's spreading rumors or who's watching me. I do my job with the authority to do it right, protected by policies I helped create. Vincent is gone. His scheme is dismantled. And I'm still here. Sometimes that's what winning looks like. Not dramatic or loud. Just still standing when the dust settles, knowing you told the truth when it mattered most. That's enough for me.